I love making pastry, so I am thrilled to show you how to make a rough puff pastry, also called a quick puff pastry. It flakes up beautifully, butter is at its base, and you can use it for sweet or savory. So getting right into it, first off, thank you. You requested this recipe, and I am happy to deliver. Now, the difference between a quick puff pastry and a traditional puff pastry is the ease in first making the initial dough, and the dough itself is easier to handle when you're rolling and folding to laminate it and get the layers in. So making a quick puff dough is virtually like making a pie pastry. Where a traditional puff pastry, you make a flour water dough, and then you have your barrage, your big piece of butter, and you gradually work the two together. And it takes a lot of elbow grease to get that done. But making a pie dough, I'm working all the ingredients into the flour. So I've got my flour, a little bit of sugar, and salt. And I'll just put this on the mixer to give it a stir, just to combine everything. I follow the same principle that I apply to making my pie pastry from scratch in terms of coating the flour with a little bit of oil first, because I look at it as controlling the hydration. If you're coating the flour with 100% fat in the vegetable oil before you add your butter, that means by the time it comes to add the water, then you've got that protective flour that won't hydrate to develop the glutens. You know what? The way pizza dough stretches, we don't want that in our puff pastry dough. There's no visible change to the flour when you add the oil, but now I can add my butter. Now this is a full pound of butter. So a puff pastry compared to a pie pastry, far more butter rich. And I just throw all the pieces in. And this butter is cold from the fridge. And I don't want to work it in all the way. I want nice big chunky pieces still visible before I add the water and at the end of the process, because that's what's going to be rolled and flattened into the puff pastry. All right, now taking a look, you can see big chunky pieces of butter, but there is a bit of a crumbly texture to the rest of the flour. So I know I've got that butter worked in a little bit, but still some big pieces. Now it's time for the liquid. So I've got cold water, and then I've got a little bit of vinegar. You can use white vinegar or lemon juice, and the acidity reacts with the proteins in the flour to allow them to relax. And that is critical because you're going to be rolling, folding, and resting the dough through 3 different phases. So you need the proteins to be able to relax and release a little bit so that you can roll the dough easily. But at the same time, you need the water to give the puff pastry structure within the dough itself to hold in those flaky layers. I'm taking care of some of the technical things now so I don't have to bother you with them later. Now I'll just mix this just until the dough comes together. Oh, and it's gonna work. And believe me, you're gonna work too when you're rolling it. Okay. Let's take a look at the dough so you get a good sense of its consistency. It will feel soft right now because it has just been worked and the butter has softened even in that short amount of time. And I'll just finish bringing it together on my work table and shaping it. This recipe makes just over 1 kilo of dough. it makes 1.1 within a couple of grams of that. So you know that you can divide it up into portions and freeze it once you make it. Whenever I'm making puff pastry, I always make more than I need for a single recipe. If you're going to go through the effort, you want to have lots on hand. So I do want to make sure the dough is coming together. And this allows me to press it flat into a bit of a rough rectangle. That's going to be the theme moving forward. So you can see visible pieces of butter within the dough itself. You want that because now we have to let the dough chill and rest. In the recipe, I specify a minimum an hour. That is the absolute minimum. Ideally, 2 hours or more. So take the time you need. You can take 3-4 days to make the dough and just roll it once a day. But if you want to get this done in a day, the absolute minimum is an hour between each rest. So let me wrap this up. I'm going to pop this in the fridge and then it will be ready for its first roll. Now that the initial dough has had a chance to rest, it's time for the first roll. I'll reuse this. And all you need is a good rolling pin, your dough, some flour for your work surface. I like to use a bench scraper initially, and a measuring tape does come in handy. That way, each time you roll, you get a consistent size. When I'm rolling rough pastry, I give it 3 rolling sessions with a chill time in between. During each one of those rolling sessions, I roll and fold the dough twice. So ultimately, it gets rolled and folded 6 times. The same way each time. So spread a little flour on my work surface. The last tool that comes in handy is a dry pastry brush. Because there's so much butter on the surface of this first rough puff batch, you will need some flour on your work surface just to prevent sticking, but you will brush it all off. While I like to use a French tapered rolling pin for rolling most of my pastry, and for when I'm actually rolling puff pastry out to use it and bake it, I like a substantial rolling pin for rolling and folding the puff pastry. It's easier to keep the pin level so that those layers of butter as I roll and fold will stay level. So with each roll, I'm looking for a rectangle that's about 10 by 20 inches, regardless of the type of fold. There we go. So you want to brush off your excess flour because this flour has not been coated with oil. So it would just be absorbed into the dough, into the water portion, which we don't really want. That's why it's a good idea to brush off your excess flour, especially early in the rolling process. As you move along, you'll find you need less flour to roll. So now I'm starting with the 3-fold. So kind of like it sounds. You fold one way and then the other. Give it a little press. And then you can see these pieces of butter, which were coarse at first, are starting to flatten. And that's the key behind puff pastry, because as we roll and fold, those layers of butter become thinner and thinner and more even throughout the puff pastry. And the key is when the pastry bakes. So those thin sheets of butter, when the pastry goes in the oven, generates steam, and that steam pushes up the flour around it. And those thousands of layers is what makes the puff pastry so flaky. And of course, the butter gives it the flavor. So to complete this first rolling session, I need to roll this dough out, again, to the same measurement, 10 by 20. And I've rotated the dough 90 degrees. So I'm not rolling my rectangle this way longer, but this way, following the seams of where the fold is. But you still will have to roll widthwise just to get the right dimension. It's amazing, even just after the first fold, how the appearance of the dough changes. It's so much smoother. Excellent. All right. Now I needed so much less flour for this fold, so there's nothing actually to brush off. Now it's time for the book fold. So this adds 4 layers. The 3-fold, you're layering the dough 3 times. Now 4 on top of that equals already 12 layers within the first folding session. The key to a good book fold is not to bring your 2 rough edges into the middle and folding, because now if you roll like this, your ends will be a little uneven within the dough and you risk an uneven flakiness. So what I like to do is you put the seam off center, like so, and you can give it just a tiny little press. And then your book fold, so now it's in half, you fold it again, so it looks like a book. And I will just roll this slightly just to get it in a good position for rolling again. But now the dough needs to rest a little bit. One rolling session and this dough is already transformed. I'll let this rest for a couple of hours because that is ideal. And then I'm going to do that exact same rolling system. Roll, 3-fold, roll, book fold 2 more times before the pastry is complete. And now it's time for rolling session number 2. First, the 3-fold. That is the second rolling session complete. So the last session had us at 12 layers. This one, with the 2 folds, now brings us up to 144 layers. Time for a little chill down, and then on to round number 3, the final rolling session. Okay, time for the final rolling session. Another 3-fold and book fold. And you can really see, well, you can almost not see the butter, but it's just there under the surface. Those layers of flour and layers of butter are just getting thinner and thinner and thinner. When you're in a rotation of making lots of puff pastry, you have the tradition of marking it depending on where you are in the folding process. So you would just simply press in to show that you had rolled and folded once, 2 for 2, and then 3 would tell you the dough is complete. Of course, if you're just doing a single batch, you'll probably keep tabs. Believe me, you'll know when you're done rolling. Three-fold. And now for the final book fold. I find I always feel that final fold. That's a lot of layers in there. Don't short yourself on the length and width because it just makes it harder to roll the next time because your puff pastry will be so thick. Actually, this brings up a good point. Whew, after all this rolling and folding, if you're getting tired or if you find the dough is just not yielding to you, put it in the fridge. Walk away, make a cup of tea, come back in 10 minutes, and you'll find it's easier to roll. The dough has rested, and so have you. Oh, literally an inch short. I can do it. There we go. That final book fold. Look how smooth that dough is. So taking the 144 layers at the end of the second fold and adding a trifold and a book fold takes it up to 1,728 layers of pastry. You have just made puff pastry. Now what to do with it? As I mentioned earlier, this makes just over a kilo. So at this point, I like to divide it up into pieces. You can freeze for months, whatever you don't need for today's bake. Now I'm just going to cut this in half and we'll get a good close-up shot so you can see the flour and the butter are close in color, but you can actually see the flat layers, the thin layers of butter between the flour. Oh, now you do deserve a break because now that you've made this puff pastry, of course, you have to let it chill and relax before you bake it. I'll pack this away and then I think I'm in the mood for something savory. How about a tomato tart? Well, the proof is in the pastry. Let's see how a quick puff recipe does bake up. I'm just going to make 2 tomato tarts, so I don't need tons of pastry. When you buy sheets of store-bought puff pastry, it's usually about a 1/4 inch. Sometimes a little more or a little less, or sometimes you actually do buy it in blocks or squares. I don't roll it quite as thinly as I roll pie dough because you want to leave room for that puff pastry to grow and become so flaky. And if you roll it too thin, it can flatten out those layers that you just put all the work into rolling and folding in. All right. I do trim away the uneven ends to the puff pastry. That way you get a good clean lift when you're baking your puff, but don't throw these scraps away. Even though they won't have a perfectly even shape, you can re-roll them and turn them into, one of my favorite things to make is palmiers, which are little spiral sugar-coated puff pastries. An uneven puff won't show the difference. But these are the pristine pieces right here. I'll get my baking tray. And the easy way to get a framed tart shell with your puff pastry is take a paring knife and cut 2 right angle incisions so they can loosen up. Rotate. Don't cut all the way around, so I leave the pastry attached at opposing corners, like so. Then it's easy to create your tart shell. I'd need a little brush with some egg wash to hold it in place. I'll just put egg wash over the whole shell. And you fold over one side, fold over the other. And now you've got a beautiful little opening to fill with something sweet or something savory. I need my egg wash. Now, sometimes the weight of the filling you put in the center is enough to hold that puff pastry down, but you've built in so many layers, it's going to want to fight back and push through. So what you'll do, take a fork and dock just the inside of the pastry. That will help it not rise up, or if it does rise up, not unevenly. Brushing your pastry with the egg wash ensures you get a nice shine and an even browning. I just whisk 1 whole egg with about a tablespoon of cool water. You can do richer ones using cream or just egg yolks, and that promotes a really deep dark brown color. It depends on what you're after. Now I've got a tomato filling. So I've just cut up some cherry tomatoes, threw in a clove of garlic, a splash of balsamic vinegar, a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper. If you've got really juicy tomatoes, you can let that sit for a little bit. Drain off the liquid, but don't throw that liquid away. Reduce that down to a tablespoon, add it back to your tomatoes. It concentrates the tomato flavor. Puff pastry needs a hot oven to really push up those layers. Allow the butter to melt quickly, push up the layers, and then start crisping them up. So I've preheated my oven to 400 degrees, and I'll give these a good 20 to 25 minutes. I'm blistering the tomatoes, but it's really about reading the puff pastry. When it's a rich golden brown, then you know you're done. Here we go. Quick puff put to the test. All right, here it goes. Is making quick puff pastry worth it? I would say 100% yes. Look at that gorgeous flakiness. You don't get that from commercial puff pastry. We've got those tomatoes nestled in there, and I'll just top this with a little crumbled goat cheese, little fresh basil. Now that you've seen all the steps to make your own quick or rough puff pastry, I know you can do it. Sure, it takes a little muscle and a lot of time and patience, but the end result is worth it. I want you to impress yourself and your guests by making rough puff from scratch. Now, let's put the flakiness to the test. Oh, look at all those buttery layers. It's so good. It just absolutely melts away.